I wish we would have gone on that ghost hunt.
Yeah?
Yeah. Just hate being broke. That would have been fun.
No.
Hello and welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I'm Mari.
I'm Matthew.
And today we're going to discuss a really excellent museum in Syracuse, New York, the Erie Canal Museum.
Yes, the Erie Canal Museum.
Yes.
Along the course of the old canal.
Yes.
Where it's been filled in. And
Yes.
now stands Erie Canal Street.
Yeah, the Erie Street, Erie Boulevard.
Erie Boulevard, yeah.
Yeah, if you walk downtown Syracuse, you can definitely tell where the old canal used to be. There is still a canal that runs through New York, and it's considered part of the Erie Canal corridor. Its real name is the Barge Canal. That can be a little confusing because the real Erie Canal in a lot of towns has been filled in. Basically, it was turned into roads, which is what happened in Syracuse.
Yeah.
Interesting thing we could discuss. They're doing that whole revamp of 81 in Syracuse. Kind of what I'm going to talk about in this episode might repeat itself because they're doing the boulevard plan, which means they're going to be going right through downtown Syracuse, which does mean there's going to be some major overhaul.
Didn't they call it a grid plan?
A grid plan, yeah. Which actually, if we were in on one of the first meetings about that, 6-7 years ago?
10.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
They had an open forum for the public to come in. And I remember we were in a group that actually suggested something along the lines of a grid plan because every one of us that was in the group, when we put our head together, realized we couldn't keep the elevated separation like it is
true.
now.
It's not
It was
entirely off topic, but if they weren't going to maintain the highways as they were, all the ramps and the elevation, the elevated part of the highway, if they weren't going to put the money back into maintaining that, it just became a hazard.
Right, so we came from the point it wasn't feasible, and then it also came from the point that some of us who were pedestrians felt that the traffic coming in and off those ramps was far more dangerous than having traffic come through the city. And so I am actually glad to see the grid plan come through because it's not exactly what we wanted, but it's pretty close to what we had thought was a good idea at the time. And I think it's going to be a good thing. But like I said, history's going to repeat itself. Hopefully not as what we're going to talk about. Hopefully history won't repeat itself, I'm going to say. But we're going to discuss the Erie Canal Museum. And I will say, I think that is one of the few places I will say is haunted that we've been at. I know you don't believe in ghosts fully, and I'm one of these people like, if you can prove to me about the ghosts, if it's not every logical explanation, then I'll accept it as a ghost, and here's one of the few places where I'll accept there's ghosts. So to explain this a little better, I'm going to go ahead and read. Near downtown Syracuse, along what used to be the Erie Canal, sits a building that houses a large barge. From the street, you can see it behind the massive windows that sits between columns. The building is a wheel lock building. It was used to collect tolls on the Erie Canal, and now it holds a museum dedicated to the engineering marvel. But as the transportation moved onto the freeways that were being constructed, that building, which stood since the 1850s, was almost lost. Saving the building wasn't just saving the past, it was also saving the ghosts that haunt the structure. We had first heard about the ghost on our first visit to the Erie Canal Museum. They were doing some minor construction, so the main entrance had been diverted. We entered, paid our fee, and as we're talking to the man behind the counter, he asked if we had heard the children. The museum was quiet, so no. You might, he said. When it's a quiet day, they like to come out and play. At this point, I'm thinking children that live close to downtown. He must have noticed our confusion. The ghosts, he said. I've seen them. They're always playing in the alleyway between us and the law office. There are others in the museum. A woman that fell off her family's canal boat and was crushed in the scale is seen sometimes, near the boat and the wheel lock. An apparition of a man will sometimes seen on the lower level, and a poltergeist is supposed to cause mischief in parts of the museum. All right. As for the kids' ghosts, I'm more plausible to believe those kid ghosts. Simply because a lot of people have seen them. And if you come up to the Erie Canal Museum, next to it is a building that has a law office. And there's I describe it as an alleyway. It's not a dirty, filthy alleyway. It's actually a very nice alleyway. You can almost call it a garden way. Right. It's a beautiful walkway, really. But that's where these children are supposed to be seen. As for the poltergeist, my opinion to poltergeist has been pretty much no. But I will say that up in the upper level, in some of the displays they have, the bar display always gives me a bit of the chills. It's a beautiful bar. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's a bar that existed in a building while the canal was there. And it's the type of place you'd want to sit down and have a drink. It's an amazing, this whole room that you walk by. It's beautiful, but it always gives me the creeps, and I can't tell you why. And it's not like it's in a dark, dusty part of the museum or anything. It's actually one of the more bright parts, but it always gave me the creeps. And it's a nice-looking bar. It's got the beautiful woodwork. It's got great windows. Don't know why. Every time. Every time we went by it. So did you get anything when we were? Probably not, but I'll ask anyway.
No. If the question is, did Matt pick up anything, you can pretty much know the answer is no.
Yeah. Okay. So when the canal was started in 1817, with much pomp and circumstances in Rome, New York, Clinton's Ditch, or Clinton's Folly, as it was called, named for the senator that pushed the legislation through, the original idea was to give merchants an easier way to bring their goods to markets from New York City to Buffalo, but its influence in many ways shaped New York State. The canal helped grow many of the cities along its route. Syracuse was no exception. When you walk downtown along Erie Boulevard, you might notice something odd about some of the buildings. Most of the street follows the path of the old Erie Canal. Some of the buildings seem to have odd facades facing one direction. This is because when they were built, they were built to face the canal and not the busy streets they do today. In 1825, the canal was opened completely. In 1850, the wheel lock building was constructed. Its purpose to weigh the canal boats as they passed through Syracuse and charge them a toll based on the weight of their cargo. The canal boats would move into position on the canal dock. As the water was drained, the boat would come to rest on a cradle attached to scales. The weighmaster would then take the weight from the empty weight certificate, subtract it from the weight in the scales, and then he would assess the fee. So now you see how that woman was killed, that they say haunts that area of the museum. She probably was on the barge and fell off as they were draining and got caught between the boat and the cradle. Horrible way to go. Oh my God.
Weren't these deaths more frequent than that, though?
I don't know about people who transported on the canal. I mean, there were deaths. I mean, we remember taking the ghost walk and the one person talking about the canal, the boys who'd run the mules up and down the canal, and how some of them would, be accidentally killed. But yeah, so there were deaths along the canal, but I don't think after the canal was running, it was as bad as when it was built, which we will be discussing in a different episode.
Yeah.
The cost of life to build a canal. But yeah, you can tell that's a horrible way to go. I mean, that was just a bad accident. Now, we've been on the barge boat in the museum. We've been on a barge boat that somebody reconstructed that was parked down by Inner Harbor that one year. You can see how you could fall off on those boats if you're not thinking they weren't actually built with public safety in mind.
Yeah, weren't they called packet boats?
Packet boats, yeah.
Yes, and they were built pretty much for economy.
Yeah.
Not for safety.
Yeah.
And you had to watch yourself.
Oh, yeah.
If you were a passenger, one of those boats for any reason, whether or not you were just gaining passage from one place to another, or if you were conveying goods or services, that really, the Erie Canal really opened that up.
Oh, yes, it
opened the economy up and to travel. And something happened in upstate New York that didn't before, and that was tourism.
Yeah, exactly.
People traveling from this opened up travel for ordinary people, and you could, I don't know how much was it to. That's a good question. How much was it to ride the packet boat?
I don't know.
That was.
I wish we were doing this at the canal. I think they have that posted somewhere.
I'm sure I could look it up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's another blind spot in our in our research. Okay. It couldn't be more than a couple of pennies.
Well, they mainly would collect the money of the tolls, like I explained. And that was to pay for the building of it. Now, here's the cool thing. By 1883, the state stopped collecting tolls due to the success of the canal.
Yeah.
Their original goal was to cover the cost of the construction, but they had collected 17 times that amount.
Well, that's good for maintenance.
Yeah. And as the tolls were no longer collected, many of the wheel-lock buildings were torn down. The one in Syracuse became a dry dock for canal boat repairs and was also rented out for office space. Now there's the Chittenango Canal Museum, which is a dry dock building. We haven't been there yet, but that museum was a dry dock as well for boats to go in for repairs. So I've always thought that would be an interesting one to swing by one of these days. I know we drove by it a couple of times. I think one time we went to stop there and they were closed, but that's one.
Getting back to the museum.
So when the barge canal, which I mentioned before, was opened north of Syracuse, the Erie Canal in the city was filled in. The New York Department of Works took over the building until 1954. 2 years later, a request was put into the state to turn the building over to the New York Department of Education. This was denied. The reason? The new freeway was planned to go through the spot where the building stood. Now here, oh my goodness. Here they're like we mentioned, we sat in like over 10 years ago on a public forum on what are we going to do about the 81 problem.
Yeah.
These bridges are starting to collapse. Yeah. It needs to be redone.
Nobody wants to put money back into the infrastructure.
Right. And so they reached out to the public to see what they wanted, and we sat in on these forums, and it was really, I thought, a really good start of things. They were just kind of filling out what the people wanted. Okay, nobody really knows this is going on until they go, hey, we've got this building here. Why don't we give it over to the New York Department of Education? They need offices, or whatever it was, like either offices or maintenance or something. I can't remember. And they go to the state, and the state's like, no, that building's going to be demolished. It was like Arthur Dent finding out his house is going to be torn down the day the bulldozers show up. Oh, the plans were on display, in the basement, in a disused laboratory with a sign to beware the leopard, Yes, we always have to call out Douglas Adams, that. But, so here we go. People are like, you're doing what now?
Yeah.
I mean, we sat in on that forum 10 years ago, and there are going to be people who are just hearing about this now in Syracuse and getting ticked, but it's like 10 years ago they were asking for public input about this.
Yeah.
And it hasn't actually gone out of the news. I mean, even when we moved out of Syracuse, I could still catch news about this.
Every year they would hem and haw over it.
Yeah.
And, there's the cost of maintaining it. Yeah. But, then there's the cost of taking it down.
Right.
What
are you going to do with
like
the extra traffic?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to affect my convenience getting through town. Well,
what if we're going to Destiny?
That's a common problem.
Oh, I'm sorry. What if we're going to Destiny?
But then, what Highway 81 did to Syracuse is very much what Moses, the architect, not the biblical Moses, but the guy named Moses, who put the highways through New York City.
Oh, yeah.
Cut through entire neighborhoods. Of course, he just punched a highway through the cheap side.
Which is kind of what happened in 81.
And divided, and it cut the city in two. And it kept commerce from coming in to the city because of the highway. So you would literally just drive right above the city.
And totally ignore it.
And totally skip over it.
Which brings up, so here's the same plan happening in Syracuse in the 50s, and even some of the local government doesn't know about this happening. I mean, talk about, lack of communication there. So here's an historic building that survived all the rest of the wheel-lock buildings being ripped down.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we got to do something. And there is, if you've never been to Syracuse, the interesting part about this part of Syracuse is downtown. And I do mention, you notice there's other buildings that you kind of see are kind of a little odd, the way they're built. But then you got to remember that they were built to service a canal, not the street traffic. So that's why sometimes it looks like the architecture isn't quite right.
Right, exactly.
Well, it would be perfect if you were coming in on a boat. That's my point.
Right, exactly.
But there are a lot of historic buildings down there. I mean, as much as, Syracuse downtown gets a bad reputation, and I think I even remember saying in the forum we were in, the public discussion we were in, it's like, you've got Armory Square, you've got Franklin Square, you've got, a couple of areas where there's Clinton Square, but they're separated by nothing.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a lot of commerce down there. I think when we left, there was a lot of revitalization going on, and Armory Square was getting larger. You could almost say that, when we went to Armory Square, it was pretty much like that 3-block area when we first moved down to Syracuse. Now you would say it's stretched out to at least like a 10-square block area. I mean, not all of it's called Armory Square, but it seems to be enveloping that whole area, right, where you're getting a lot more eateries, and you're getting the hotel put in, and the theater got a whole new facelift. And unfortunately, our favorite roast beef place had to move because of that, and then where they moved didn't work, and
it closed down. Well, they changed their bill of fare as well.
True. If they would have stuck with their original menu, I think they would have fine there.
They would have been fine.
But they were still excellent roast beef sandwiches, and I do miss them. Anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
And I can't think of the name of the place, and I apologize. But everyone who's been to the Clark's, thank you. Yes, Clark's roast beefs, and I probably have hundreds of people screaming at me like, "It was Clark's!"
Yeah. Right.
One sandwich, 30 beers. It was perfect.
Yeah. And cheese platters with crackers and onions and
no distractions.
Yeah, and no TVs.
No TVs.
No bloody music.
It was blaring. A great place to go share a sandwich with somebody, have a conversation. That's why we liked it.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's down there now? Well, Funkin' Waffles moved down there. They came back down from the college area down towards
which couldn't have been any better. Yeah. It was the best thing they could have done for their business, is getting out of the.
I mean, I loved the place where they were up at the college, but when you're not a college student, it's kind of. I have a reason to be in Oswego, and if you have a reason to be on the campus, you don't feel as out of place. Right. But just to go have some excellent waffles. Yeah. And they are excellent waffles.
Oh, they are good. We've been there many times.
Oh my God. It was you felt kind of out of place because technically we weren't really on campus. We were just outside campus. I love the feel of the old place. I haven't been to the new place yet. I really am remiss not going there, but it's kind of hard.
And they had strange hours. Their hours are a lot more regular now. Yeah. Because they were
more
on
geared,
University Hill.
More geared to the university crowd,
And so their schedule reflected that. Yeah. And you'd go to Funkin' Waffles on a day that you would expect them to be open, and they're closed. Yeah.
Because they were more geared to the college. Now they're downtown. Absolutely. Yeah, they have better hours.
But closing on a Friday? What are they, Seventh-day Adventists?
No, I definitely want to go back down and see their new place.
All right, back to the museum.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to how they were saving. What I was leading up to was this discussion of how that part of downtown is blooming. Mm-hmm. And like I explained before, there are a lot of really awesome old buildings down there. And it's really sad to see a lot of them, empty. Mm-hmm. But there's buildings like the City Hall. That is a very old City Hall. I mean, it's a very, I don't know how to describe it, European-looking City Hall, really. You have all these other buildings down there. But, like I said, when we first moved to Syracuse, there were a lot more empty ones. But there's been revitalization. A lot more needs to be done, yes.
Absolutely.
But it's going in the right direction, is my point.
Well, that's good.
Okay. And really that
nice to finally say.
That was brought about by people putting an effort in, which is what happened with the museum. Okay.
Yep.
The Junior League of Syracuse jumped in to save the building. They were able to convince the Onondaga Board of Supervisors to take over the Waylock building. The state agreed, but a stipulation was put in. The building must be used for a public canal museum. So the building was saved, dun, dun, dun. As were the ghosts.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean,
interesting thing I've heard about these ghosts is that you'll spy them in the daylight.
Yes, the children especially, yeah.
Yeah, people who heard them or maybe seen them, maybe thought they were like a first-person interpreting an actor. They sometimes have those there. Yeah. And they were mistaken for those people. And then they'd come in, you know, at the desk where you sign in at the guest book and maybe give people, the folks there, a donation, and then mention, hey, I didn't know you had first interp people here. And then the person behind the counter is like, who? What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I misspoke when I read mine. It wasn't the fee, it was the donation. But you're right. There are parts of that museum, like I said, the bar display up front, up the top, you know, second floor. Well, that came from another building, and yet some reason that always gives me the creeps. That display, and it's not a scary display, you know. It's in a very well lit area. It's a very beautiful display, but it gives me the creeps. I don't know why, but they did a wonderful job where like they had parts of an actual general store that was on the ground level originally in a different building is now up on the second floor of the Erie Canal Museum. The barge itself is very neat. You can go, if you've never been there, you can actually go onto this barge and into the barge and see how people lived. And there's some fascinating history about some of the festivals and that they had in Syracuse years ago, which I can't go into too much. I just remember the one time we went in there, took a bunch of pictures, and I was realizing how creepy that one festival was. But anyway, because of the outfits they wore.
Refresh my memory.
They were pointed hoods, but they're like multicolored ones, and they just looked really creepy in that display. I don't know. It's just something I remember from that. But it was an interesting part of the history. They have they're talking about the toll collector there. They've kept the office like he had it, or the toll most likely he had it, and how they have the charts and that, how he'd figure out what the tolls were.
Yeah.
So it's the
Waymasters.
The Waymasters, yeah. And they do play noises and that. So I think some people, when they go in there and hear about ghosts, it might be, you know, the atmospheric noises they're playing. Because when you're near the Wheelmasters, the wheel lock office, they are playing some atmospheric where you hear like, you know, the slosh of the water and people kind of chattering and that. Or at least they did last time. I don't know if that's something that they still do. And so that might be some of the ghost sightings. But no, I really do think the kids are there. I mean, I haven't seen them, but you definitely get a feel when you walk down that alleyway. And it's not the hair on the back of your head like you get down some alleyways in Syracuse. People live there, know which ones I'm talking about. But no, there definitely is an aura of history there, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's a lot of things there that really bring it home. How important the Erie Canal was, and how important that one particular building was to the running of the Erie Canal. It really did change, not just New York. The Erie Canal really, you know, assisted in building most of America too. I mean, there were other canals. Even Pennsylvania had some major canals down there too. But I think the Erie Canal was really the one that took a hold of people's imagination. I mean, we all know the song. You know, and if you don't, you can look it up pretty quick. Tennessee Williams does a version of it if you're looking on YouTube for a version. But I grew up in northwestern Wisconsin, and I knew this song about working on the Erie Canal. And, you know, I had heard about that. And so, I mean, that's how important it was. And it was kind of neat living and walking over the street that had been the canal and going into Indy Harbor.
I remember songs when... learning those songs while I was in elementary school. Yeah. In choir, trying to turn kids onto music and whatnot, and bringing all these old. There were old songs about the Erie Canal and old songs about patriotic songs during the Mexican-American War. Interesting. Yeah. I remember one particular stanza. You'll always know your neighbor. You'll always know your pal. If you never ever gain them on the Erie Canal. Kind of. I was always wondering, gosh, if that's true, then what kind of jerks are along the Erie Canal? that I never want to see.
We discussed in the Starn episode, he built an entire hotel and opera house there to bring in, from people from the canal. I talked about the Chittenango boat museum, the canal museum there. All along the Erie Canal, even now, there are such remnants of things that were built up just to support the canal. Dry docks and restaurants and museums. Lockport's got a connection to the canal. And even the names, like Lockport.
Yeah.
That's
pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward there, And the fact they still have the canal sort of, well, not the actual canal, because now it's the barge canal. Yeah. But you can still go up and down this piece of history. And coolest thing we've ever seen, and I got to see it in person, was the Viking ship coming down the Erie Canal. That was the coolest thing I ever saw.
Got to actually board a Viking ship on the Erie Canal.
Yes.
And that
we had to go to Little Falls for that, but it was so worth it.
It was.
Oh my God. But I was sitting at Rome, and we heard about this Viking ship coming down. It was coming back from Superior, I believe. It was coming up through the Great Lakes. It was going to come down through the Oswego Canal, through Oneida Lake, and hit the barge canal, and which meant it would go right by Rome. So I sat there, and I got video of this. They had to take the dragon head off because it couldn't make it through under some of the bridges, but it was,
some of those were pretty low.
Yeah, but we got to see this real Viking ship come down the canal.
Since the Viking ship was historically accurate, removing that figurehead from the bow of the ship was something they did.
Yeah.
And if they were on a Viking and they intended to raid a place, they would put the dragon figurehead upon the bow of the ship.
Well, I joked because right after that I walked up to Fort Stanwix and was showing them the videos I had taken, and I kind of joked. I'm like, hey, at least we knew the fort was here to protect us from the Vikings. But here's an interesting fact. 2 days before... 2 days before, a Polynesian boat had gone through.
Oh, the reed boat.
The reed boat had gone through. So, and if you know that, the reason they picked the Erie Canal is, especially in where Rome is, and we will discuss this more and more in other podcasts coming up, is there was a thing known as the Oneida Carry, which was between the Mohawk River and Wood Creek. Correct? Those were the two rivers?
I'd have to look it up again. Don't quote us on that.
Don't quote us on that. I believe those were the two rivers. But depending on the time of year, it could be anywhere from maybe half a mile to 5 miles between those two rivers. And people were using the rivers already to do commerce, the fur trappers and whatever. And that's the reason Fort Stanwix ended up where it is. It was there to protect that carry.
Strategically and tactically advantageous to have a fortress there.
Exactly. And so people were already using the rivers that kind of ran along the line that they were going to use for the Erie Canal. Anyway, the Erie Canal was just basically widening the road that people were already using. And now you didn't have to get out of your boats and carry them over this ground, hence the name Oneida Carry,
right?
You could stay on the waterways. You didn't have to get out of your boat. So seeing the Viking ship go through and seeing the I wish I had seen the Polynesian ship, but were examples of, even if they weren't canals, that Viking ship probably could have made it through the carry. There was enough they would have had to put it on rollers, but if the carry was only at the shortest point of the year, a lot of effort and pushing, they could have probably made it in a day.
Yeah.
But it was plausible. So anybody who thinks the Vikings could have made it into the interior of the United States, I've just given you a way they could have made it into at least far central New York. And it would have been plausible. Probably didn't happen. Yeah. But very plausible. It could have been plausible. Because their ships were made to go on small rivers and the ocean, which that kind of proved as it went by.
Well, when you look at the packet boats that were running along the Erie Canal, they're very much that same kind of size.
Would you say the barge in the Erie Canal Museum is actually a little larger than that longboat we were on, than the Viking longboat?
Just slightly longer.
Just slightly longer, but
probably just as wide.
Just as wide, yeah.
And very much the same kind of design.
Yeah.
As the Viking longship.
except for how they put the wood together. Cause
of course.
In the Viking longship, they put the wood together in such a way that when it twists and turns with the waves, the barge definitely didn't have that twisting and turning because it didn't have to deal with ocean waves.
Exactly. It was not expected to go out on the open ocean.
Right.
It would have gotten swamped in the first big wave that came along.
Whereas the Viking ship was expected to do both, and I believe that Polynesian boat, as it went through, was kind of proving that too. Is like it could do both. Now, granted, I don't think the Polynesians would have made it into Central New York, but it was still kind of cool to see.
Not with the reed boat they had in that design.
Right.
But if they had redesigned that reed boat, taken the same materials and designed a boat that would do that, I'm certain you could probably get a reed boat to do that.
Yeah. But what were the names of the boats they used before they put the canal through? Those small things, the Bardeaux? Was that the name?
Bateau.
Bateau, thank you. Yeah. They're basically like a fat canoe. That's a description of them.
I believe that was the French term for them, bateau.
Yeah, bateau. Or you know what they remind me of? Those Welsh fishing boats. That that's what they remind me of. So those were small, maneuverable on the rivers, but also big enough you could throw a lot of fur in them, or you could throw things you're going to trade in them, and basically have one person in the boat.
Well, but circling back to the canal,
right?
You find a lot of different kinds of vessels running up and down the canal, and not just the barge boats being towed by the mules. That's the iconic Erie Canal. But then you have small rowboats, small sailing boats, that sort of thing.
Well, last year we were at Lock 21, was it?
Yeah.
We were talking to the wheelmaster there, or whatever, the lockmaster, I guess you call him now. We were talking about the different type of boats he's seen. And he talked about somebody who took a canoe from Buffalo and canoed the entire canal. It was impressive, actually, if you ask me.
And it's a nice, safe way to do it, too. Yeah. There are no rapids. It's flat for the most part.
Oneida Lake would be the only problem, I think.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with a fairly large lake.
Right. You'd have to stick to the shallows with your canoe and stay out of the open water because you know.
But we've seen yachts go up and down that canal. You see a lot of little power boats. Wide variety.
A lot of people are retired going, taking their dream boat up and down the canal.
Yeah, because
something that's on our bucket list is take a boat.
Technically, if we get the right boat, we could. When we were still in Rome, we were joking like if we got the right boat, we could leave Rome and end up in Superior, Wisconsin.
Yeah,
if we got the right boat.
Exactly.
And didn't mind going on the Great Lakes,
Right, exactly.
But yeah,
I've boated on the Great Lakes before. Right?
Oh, I know you have. I haven't. I know you have. But yeah, that really was the importance of the canal. Really, I mean, the commerce was already happening. They had to make it more efficient.
I'm surprised that after the Erie Canal was constructed, I'm surprised there wasn't more death. I guess more drowning.
Well, like I said, when we get to the discussion when we talk about how dangerous it was to build it.
Well, that was building it. I mean, after while it was in operation.
Oh, I'm sure I can
probably go back into the records and find a lot more instances.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were like robberies or what you call them, piracies. On the canal. If it's done on high water, I believe if it's done on water, no matter if the water is a canal or a river or what, I think it's called piracy. Right. I bet there was a lot of that. You had a lot of accidental drownings. Again, in the Starn episode, we talked about the guy who got drunk and fell into the canal. That still happens today.
That still happens now in collisions.
And overturned boats. You get caught in the bad weather. Like I said, you got to take Oneida Lake now for part of the canal, and Oneida Lake is pretty choppy and nasty.
Oh yeah.
And I think some people think, it's a small inland lake. Well, it's not actually that small.
That little. It's really deep in some places.
Yeah.
But getting back to the canal again, this woman lost her life while at the lock because of a mishap. There was a lot of that too when they were trying to maneuver the boats in the canal further down from that way station. I know of an instance where one of the kids who was handling one of the mules fell into of the canal and got caught between a couple of boats and drowned. And that was on one of the ghost walks we went on.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah. But yeah, even nowadays, you'll see the danger because remember, we're watching those boats come in and lock, and they got to rise and lower the water depending which way the boats are going. You could tell it if a boat didn't moor itself the proper way. When that water's moving, they could easily get sucked in and hit another boat, or somebody could fall off and get crushed in there. So yeah, it's still a bit of a danger. So yeah, I know accidents probably did happen all the time. They're probably still happening all the time. I mean, they're definitely more safety geared now because you got to moor your boat a certain way so you can go up and down properly. So you're not running into other boats.
We could spend a whole episode on the science behind the dangers of running a lock.
Yeah. And, so anyway, this museum, I highly recommend it. We've been a few times. It's great. Very knowledgeable staff that works there. Very interesting exhibits. I
didn't have any experiences myself with the ghosts that are at the museum, but that's not to say that maybe you might not.
Yeah, like I said, that the bar area always creeps me out a bit. I don't know why. The alleyway definitely, that's got to be haunted. But it's nice ghosts. Those are kids. They're having fun. That's why you always hear them laughing. That's why you always hear them kind of playing out there. And then I've never seen the lady. The poltergeist, people know my feelings about poltergeist. That's a no. That's a no for me.
That's really.
But I do highly recommend the canal. The Erie Canal Museum. If you want to go, it's located at 318 Erie Boulevard, East in Syracuse, New York, right downtown. It's open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sundays from 10 to 3. Closed major holidays. But yeah, it's well worth at least an hour and a half of your time. Really,
check it out on the web too. Just search for Erie Canal Museum in Syracuse, New York, and you'll find it easy and do some fact finding before your trip.
Yeah, highly recommend it.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you will see the ghosts. Maybe you see that lady and tell me about her.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to our Gaslit podcast.
And have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Podcasts. Please like, share, and review, and if you really like us, tell your friends. Unearthly Upstate is an animated Lyre Media production. The show is produced by Matt and Mari Minette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing done by Mari Minette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Unless stated otherwise in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast have not paid or contacted us for any type of promotion. And please check out our webpage for full credit and sources for the episodes.